Well, there we are, back for another week, live on the live stream, everyone's favorite place to hang out on a Tuesday. I'm Mike Scala, joined once again by Jay Carter, BLM Tokyo Chair, hip hop artist Timid, and we have a special guest, Jeremy Bucaria, who is part of HBCOP, and you'll explain your roles. You're the Vice President of Community Relations, doing a lot of good work in the community. Thank you for joining us, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Jay, what do you got for us this week? I know we start off with something light. You have something that, I don't want to be spoiled by it. I want to be surprised like everyone else. So what is your topic?
All right, well, I think it's a good one here. Especially we've got Vice President of HBCOP here. So it's kind of a leader in the community, so to speak. So there's an article I came across about 10 traits of highly confident men. And I think to be a leader, you kind of have to have that confidence. So let's see, you guys agree with any of these traits, or do you hold any of these traits?
Okay.
So number one on this list was confident men take action. Now I think this can also apply to women as well, not necessarily just men, just confident people in general.
Right. Well, let me ask you, what is the source of this article?
This is a hespokestyle.com. I've actually never heard of it, but it popped up on my I forget what the name of that app is. There's an app called Flipboard, which is an app where you can curate news articles, blog articles for certain topics and things that So this was kind of a general one that popped up. So I thought it was kind of interesting because we're going to be talking leadership and things today. So
Action. What else we got?
We got confident men have a vision. I think it's important for any type of plan. You need some sort of a vision.
Right. I think you have the vision first usually, and then you take action in accordance with that vision. Right.
There was a I don't know if you saw I know you're not into the Marvel movies. I don't know if Jeremy's an MCU guy, but in the movie Shang-Chi, there was a quote that was really good. They said, if you aim at nothing, you hit nothing.
True.
And so I thought that was...
That was like the Michael Jordan quote, like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that comes with number 3 here, that confident men aren't afraid to fail.
Yes, that's a good one.
Yeah. I think that inactivity kind of holds a lot of people back because they're afraid of that failure.
Right. I like in Rocky when he says it's not about how hard you hit, it's about how hard you can get hit.
Yes.
And keep getting up.
Yes. Was that Mickey?
And I think Rocky said that to his son.
Okay. Mickey was the dude. Number 4 was take care of themselves. So confident men take care of themselves. I think I'm going to replace this with just men. I'm just going to say confident people because I think this all applies to everybody.
Men, yeah. It looks like maybe that magazine or whatever was like a men's thing. So that's probably why they say confident men.
Yeah, so they take care of themselves. They respect themselves. Exercise, maintain their bodies, eat well, that type of thing. I've been slacking a little bit on the eating well lately and the exercise.
Jeremy, I saw you posted something. Are you working on nutrition or something?
Yeah, well, I'm working on eating healthy, and I got to the gym the last 2 days in a row.
Nice.
So it's a humble beginning, but I started. So yeah, I guess I feel that you really have to have your mind, body, and soul in check if you're going to be a leader. Because you're going to have to deal with stress. And that stress will take a toll on you mentally and physically.
That's right.
And, so those things are very important, and I'm learning that, the older that I get, more important to take care of yourself. I'm not as young as I used to be, so you bounce back, less easy.
Yeah.
So taking care of yourself is definitely a trait of a leader.
That reminds me, Jay, when we used to do those road trips, we used to perform a lot of music throughout the country, and late at night, sometimes you're on the road, nothing else is open, but a rest stop, you grab a burger in one of those rest stops, or there's, some fast food. When you're in your 20s and maybe even early 30s, that's fine. 3 o'clock in the morning, you can have a Whopper meal or something like that. Try doing that now. I'll get sick. You know what I mean? If I try eating some fast food late at night, my body just doesn't handle it the way it used to.
Yeah, people tend to, the older they get, those types of meals tend to cause indigestion
Mhm.
more easily.
But
So,
speaking of gyms, Jeremy, I actually have to share something. I was actually scammed. I believe I was scammed. I used to belong to New York Sports Club, and I stopped going when the pandemic hit. I didn't want to be in gyms, and then they actually went out of business. They went bankrupt shortly thereafter, and they weren't charging anymore because they weren't in business. But unbeknownst to me, I started getting charged again like a year and a half later, I think. It was like more recently by a different entity. I think it was some entity that either bought them out or somehow took over the contract, but it was like some dude upstate who doesn't even have a gym as far as I know. And I was still being charged every month until I discovered this. And now I'm fighting it. I had to change my debit card and everything because I kept getting charged for this old gym membership for a company that doesn't even exist anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
I hope you got the whole refund.
Yeah, I did. It was a fight though. I'll tell you
wow.
that. Yeah.
Well, the fact that you're fighting it does fit into number 5 on the list. Confident people push themselves. So,
And push others when need be.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one is confident people think positively. I think that's a really big one because we can get into a negative mind state, especially these days when life has been kind of turned upside down for a lot of people. That negative mind state can lead you to a spiral of inaction.
Right. But you don't want blind optimism.
Right.
Right. It reminds me of, I think they called it a peak performance curve, where it was like some anxiety is good, but too much of it is crippling. But you don't want to be too confident where you don't feel any nervousness at all. Like some nerves actually motivate you to do. It's like you want to have a little bit of worry that things could go wrong because that pushes you and that makes sure that you check all the boxes and you're on top of your game. But too much of it obviously is a bad thing. It's like just a little bit of nerves are good.
Right. Absolutely. Number 7 here, confident people are open to learning. I think that's a major one right now. Just in general, not even for confident people, just people in general, society in general, open to learning because things are so polarized and everyone thinks that, they know the only way for things to be correct. They don't take in any new information.
Right. You don't want to surround yourself with all yes men or yes ladies or whatever the case may be. You want people who will challenge you and push back, and also people who are better than you and more knowledgeable than you in certain areas. I mean, everybody can't be everything, and that's important.
Right.
You have to delegate and to share in the knowledge with other people, and it's a give and take. I think
Right.
we're stronger together when we're able to work together and know who complements us. And when I say complements us, let me see if I'm getting this right. I mean that with an E and not an I. Is that correct? Compliment. There's two. Jeremy, help me out here. There's two versions of the word compliment, right? I'm talking about compliment.
Oh, compliment with an I.
With an E.
Right.
I think with an I means like you're the man. I'm not saying like yes man.
Someone a compliment. And
I'm not saying to pay someone a compliment. I'm saying to be complimentary. Exactly. Okay. Yes, I believe I'm saying with an E, not an I. Yes.
Right. Right. Well, I agree with that. I think there has to be a balance between being confident and being open to learning, because a lot of times, you can't discount somebody. You got to take on their knowledge from their experience, but you can't discount yourself either. And say, I don't know enough, so I have to get all this other information. Right. Sometimes what is good enough too. And I've noticed that when I speak to people that maybe have more time into something, like sometimes it's condescending, like, and then you feel like, well, I'm not new to this, or I've been around the block a few times, and then they approach you with, oh, well, I've been around the block 100 times. You've only been around there 20 times, Right. So there has to be a balance between, what and what you're taking on. So, my mother used to always say, you take it with a grain of salt, but I'm open to hear and learn from anybody. Like, and I think that's been an asset to me, so I've become more approachable, from people, and people will talk to me because I do take everyone's opinion seriously,
Right. I think there was a quote too that reminded me from what you were saying, Mike. Another quote, and it's, if you are the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Right.
So
I
kinda like
agree.
that.
A lot of people think they're the smartest person in the room.
Yeah. So
I think we all should be smart at certain things, but we have to understand what our limitations are. Like, I might be the smartest person in the room when it comes to election law, but maybe there are other people who know things that I don't know that we can work with. You know what I mean? Like, we all have our
Yeah.
specialties.
Yeah.
right, right. 8, confident people ask questions. I think that kind of plays into what we were just speaking about there, as far as continuing to learn, and being willing to admit certain, you might not know everything. You might need to ask questions of people who have, some expertise in certain areas, or some information you might not have.
Well, this one maybe is a little bit gendered because the old stereotype was that men never want to ask for directions. Maybe they're
I think
saying to
it's
be,
kind of true a little bit, though. Yeah.
huh?
I think it's a little bit true to some degree. Guys tend to not want to, look weak because for not knowing.
But that's the point, right? They're saying
Right.
that that's really a strong quality. It's a strong
Right.
trait to know what you don't know and to be confident enough to ask the question. And
Right.
I've developed that as I got older. I think when I was younger, I was a little self-conscious about that. Like, are they going to judge me for not knowing something? But now that I'm older and I'm comfortable with who I am, it's like, no, I know that I know a lot of things. I know people respect me for the fact that I'm a smart guy and I know things. And I'm confident enough to say, I don't know everything. Who does? Right. So why even pretend?
Right. Absolutely. And I like this next one. And I didn't expect, some of the other ones you kind of think, okay, that makes sense to be on here. And this one, it makes sense to be on here, but I didn't expect to see it. Confident people don't need to be heard. So basically, like, you don't need that people to say, like, pay attention to me, or being the loudest in the room. You just have that air of confidence. And I remember my uncle saying about, his father, he never had to say that he was in control. Like, he just was, like,
Right.
when you have that air, you have that confidence in knowing. You don't need to project it on someone else, or try to prove it to someone else. It's just known.
Right.
So I kind of like that.
There's a
And
thing.
the last, oh, go ahead.
There's such a thing as being overexposed. Also, I find it's kind of like the I guess it's supply and demand, and like a rare commodity is more valuable. So if you're everywhere all the time, you don't have the same presence as if you make it mean something. Like, you walk into a room and everyone turns their head and says, I can't believe he's here or she's here. You know what I mean? There's something to that. I think, like, you don't want to be overly accessible, because then your value goes down.
Right. And I think that was when you talk pre-social media days, that was kind of the standard, especially for celebrity.
Right.
From being, overexposed, or there had to be some kind of a mystique about them, so that there'd be that situation. People walk around, oh my God, they're here. Like, but now it's a little bit different in some regards, because, like, every aspect of their lives is posted daily on various different media channels.
And that's what I mean. Like, when I say be accessible, I mean, you want people to be able to reach you, especially if that's your job. You're trying to avail yourself to people to help them. You want to be accessible in that regard, but you don't need to put every detail of your life online. Like, there are certain things that you can do to keep that mystique around you, I think.
Right.
And then I think you're seen, you're appreciated by people more. I mean, even in law, in my practice, I try to be very accessible. I try to give people my cell phone number, and clients can text me, but I try to maintain boundaries also, because it's actually counterproductive to the case if you and your client are texting all day long back and forth. Like, there needs to be, I think, a certain, I don't want to say wall, but boundaries. Like, boundaries. Certain professional boundaries that kind of keep your value up. I think you don't want to be so accessible to the point where your services don't mean anything.
And I think it's also necessary to have those boundaries, because just for your own benefit, your own sake, your own personal, life and mental health. I mean, I would imagine.
Yeah, you don't want to wear yourself out.
Right.
Right. I was gonna say, like, Jeremy, I imagine in your position, you're coming into contact with a lot of people in the community often, and if your phone was just ringing off the hook constantly, it'd just, like, tear you down.
Right. A lot of things, and even I have to stop myself and say, all right, it's 10 o'clock. I'm putting the phone away. I don't care what they're saying on Facebook. I don't care who's messaging me. Like, it's not an emergency, most likely. So you know, just to wind down at the end of the day, because you could get caught up in the million projects that you're trying to do, you know, and all the people that you're trying to please. So you got to set those boundaries, because, you know, you need your downtime, you need your time to decompress, like,
Right.
and that's just part of that mental wellness that leaders need.
Yes, because then you come back with a renewed focus and you're even more effective at doing your job.
Yes.
Absolutely. And
Kendrick
that,
Lamar had a quote. I don't know if you saw. He once said, I think kind of recently, on Twitter maybe, but he said, "Don't." I'm paraphrasing, but basically, don't only let them feel your presence, also let them feel your absence.
absolutely. Absolutely. Who said that?
Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah, it's a good quote too.
Yeah.
And what Jeremy said actually segues into the final trait here. Confident men don't, or confident people don't please everyone.
Right.
So I think that's also very important, because if
It's
you're
very
trying to
important
please
in
everyone, you're
politics,
watering down
especially.
yourself. And
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, and I find it's funny because a lot of lawyers go into politics, but I find that as a lawyer, you kind of make enemies in a sense just by being a lawyer, just by doing your job, because it's a very adversarial profession. And you have to be able to understand, like, okay, I'm representing a client's interests, whose interest, this client's interest may be diametrically opposed to someone else's interests, but you're hired to do this job. Or you're doing it because you think it's for the greater good, but there are people who are going to be upset along the way. Even taking the law out of it, just in politics or community service in general, or any issue, right? You take a stance on any issue out there, you're going to alienate people on the other side of that issue, but you can't worry about trying to please everyone, because then you'll never take a stand. If you don't stand for anything, don't stand for something or you fall for anything, right? That was the saying. You kind of need to put yourself out there and be bold, even knowing that it's going to alienate some people, but it's the right thing to do, and you're moving the conversation forward, or you're moving the issue forward, or whatever it is, you're on the right side of it as you see it.
Right. You got to be bold. You have to be steadfast. I remember it was Colonel Sanders. He was trying to sell his chicken recipe all over the place. No one would buy his chicken recipe. And I think Tony Robbins made a joke about it. He said, eventually you'd be like, man, maybe I should change the recipe. But he didn't change the recipe. He just stayed with it. And then now, hey, we're all eating KFC.
Absolutely. So I think it's a pretty good list. I think there's some good points there for people in general. I know it's good things to work on to build your own confidence. And yeah, I think it was a pretty good thing there. So we have a poll from last week. You wanted to hit those results real quick?
Yeah. So we talked about district leaders in New York and how currently there is a male and female designation attached to district leader. When you run for district leader, you're either running for a male seat or a female seat. A lot of people don't realize that it's not mandated by law, but it is authorized by law, and the parties do use it. Although there has been some walking away from that voluntarily, lawsuits and all this other stuff. So the question was, did people think that district leaders should continue to have male and female designations, or should it be gender neutral? Anyone can run for any position. And it was actually a very close poll. It was on my Instagram, 53% to 47% in favor of no gender designations, but very close.
I think that, I mean, on my poll, I got no answers. I ran the poll on Facebook and on Instagram.
Well,
and
I saw your poll. You didn't just let people press a button. You made them write an answer. I mean, no one wants to take
Yeah. I guess, people don't want to take that extra effort into it. I was hoping there'd be like some kind of like, I wanted what their thoughts might be on it. But I mean, I can understand why it would be divided. I mean, we're still at this point where, that the reason for having that idea of having this gender thing is so that women could be treated a little bit more fairly. And so when you take that away, even amongst the gender conversations that we're having today, some women could feel that they could be taking a step back in that equality. So I can understand how there might be that mix of responses.
Right. I think that it's important in a representative democracy to, have a male and a female. I know that, like nowadays, like I know that there's other identifications and non-identifications, but to, guarantee women a spot at the table, I think that it should be held. I think that should be held, to guarantee that.
Yeah, and I can see that point of view as well. People and why that might be that close. You said it was like 54 to something like that.
53 to 47.
Yeah, I can, and so I mean it tracks, I think,
It's really interesting. First of all, I want to thank the people who actually participate in there. I'm not going to name names because they're anonymous. It's supposed to be an anonymous poll, but I do see who's voting in these, and we do have district leaders. We have even city council members engaging in some of the stuff. So I appreciate everyone out there who's watching and who's participating. I found the results to be very interesting because the politics around gender have changed so much in the past few years. And I think if you were to look at this maybe a few years ago, you would have more conservative-minded folks, I think, taking a stance that affirmative action is not something that they support. And so they wouldn't like the idea of a male seat and a female seat. They would think that it should be open for everyone. But now it seems like there's more of a stance to have hardline genders amongst the conservative-minded folks. I think more conservatives are saying, no. We want to be traditional about this and keep it male and female. And I think that's why the results are the way they are right now, because I believe more conservative-minded people are voting in favor of the male and female designations, whereas I don't think they would have a couple of years ago.
That's a good point too, because the part of the conversation has shifted a little bit. There's another factor.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting point. So let's get to Jeremy and our guest for the evening.
Okay.
Absolutely. We wanted to talk about what's going on with HBCOP and your efforts in the community. Obviously, crime is the number one issue on people's minds, public safety, and that's throughout the city and the state. We're seeing it in the budget process now. The budget is delayed, and part of that is surrounding bail reform and potentially being rolled back, giving judges more discretion, all these different issues happening in Albany. But on the ground level, you guys are doing the work. We had Ali from COP CP, and I always get these acronyms mixed up. COP CP, also on Park and City Line, and now we wanted to bring on Jeremy from HBCOP, of course, in Howard Beach. So Jeremy, why don't you talk about the work that you guys are doing and what you're seeing out there?
All right, great. Traditionally we did a lot of evening patrols, starting around 7, going 10, 11. Sometimes we'd have some guys go out later than that. Everyone has a different work schedule. But recently I've been doing the after school shift with the weather getting better. So I wanted to share that with people that I'm personally trying to be out there between like 3 and 5 o'clock. Sometimes I get into the neighborhood 3:30 from my job and just patrol the schoolyards, watch the kids crossing the streets, make sure that there's, no suspicious people that we might have to keep an eye on. Just any situations that, we're looking after the kids. We're going by the playgrounds. We're going by the schools. We're hitting every corner of 11414. And so far it's been nice. We've had a couple of good days and a couple of really like freezing days. On those days, everyone gets in the house real quick, I've noticed. But I've been trying to represent HBCOP on the road for that after school dismissal. And just hopefully keeping the kids a little bit safer. So I think that's a valuable service. And I just come straight from work. Like I'll pull over the car and turn it into my HBCOP car with my decals and the light bar, and change into my uniform and then just go from there. So for a couple of hours I'm out there, looking, observing, reporting. And just even little quality of life issues, like if I see like illegal dumping or some sort of mess, I'll call it in. Like today I saw a city bike was abandoned by Hamilton Beach Park. So I had called Joe Thompson, the president, and he said he was going to contact City Bike, so they could pick up their bike. So we're out there in the afternoon. I think that's a tremendous service. And we're looking to recruit. because there's only a handful of us, but there's safety in numbers, and there's so many residents in 11414. And I'm hoping everybody could pitch in a couple of hours a week to just ride around, observe, and report. Like, that's all that we're doing. We're the eyes and ears of the neighborhood. We're neighbors helping neighbors. We're not doing this to be nosy. We don't care who you're walking around with or what you're wearing or, what you're bringing home for dinner. We just want to make sure you do it safely. I drive by the A train in Howard Beach, see what's going on over there. Hopefully people coming home from work come home to a safe environment. And it's just us looking out for each other. When Joe Thompson started this, I think it was 2014, I thought to myself, wow, this is the greatest thing I've ever heard of, a neighborhood watch, just like in the movies. And, and we've had times of having a lot of members and times with less members because, things happen in people's lives. Last semester of college, because I'm also a full-time college student, I had to take some time off because writing all these papers and doing all this reading, it takes up a lot of time. So I work full-time, I go to school full-time, but I think it's really important to get that community service in. So I'm really dedicated to that. So even if I only put out an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, it's still extra eyes and ears out there, and it benefits the community.
Absolutely. And I, of course, did a ride along with you once, and everyone that we passed seemed very grateful to see that car. It feels like they're just comfortable that there's someone out there just keeping an eye on things. And like you said, if you see something wrong, you report it right away. And so just to kind of be that extra set of eyes and ears is comforting for a lot of people, especially at a time like this.
Right. And, we're around for things like when there were blackouts in Howard Beach. We're riding around, we have our light bars on top of our car, and, for them to see the lights, and know that people are looking after their properties, during something like a blackout was really important. We help in car accidents, like where we help with traffic control, things like that. I've jump started people's cars. I have a portable battery in my car. And little things like you'd be surprised. I had to pull up behind an emergency vehicle. They were loading somebody into an ambulance at the KFC actually, and people were still trying to like drive in, even though it was like, they were practically hitting the EMTs with their car. So we decided, all right, we're going to pull up behind them. So now they're going to have to wait to get into this lot until the scene was safe. So we're all about safety. We've done a lot of community events in the past, and we hope to be invited back to more, to help with things like traffic safety and crowd control. We're just a good group of volunteers that, we have big hearts and we just want everyone to be safe and get to their homes, because Howard Beach and Hamilton Beach, they're great places to live, visit. We got great restaurants and, we're just looking out for each other. So I hope everyone listening, says, all right, I got a couple of hours here and there to just drive around and look after your neighbors. Like it's not hard, and it's very fulfilling.
Yeah, it sounds like a very good program. And you mentioned that you were looking for volunteers to help fill out the ranks a little bit. How can people reach out and find HBCOP?
Well, HBCOP is on Facebook, but we also have a website, hbcop.org. We're a 501c3. We have insurance. So, if something happens to you or you get into an accident or something during your patrolling, like we're totally legit. We're licensed, we're insured, we're a real deal 501c3. But to reach us, like I said, Facebook, hbcop.org. You could give some donations. If you don't have a lawn sign already that says HBCOP on it, then your lawn is naked. It's a $25 donation, and that's the suggested donation, and we'll bring the lawn sign to your house and we'll put it in for you. You just message us on Facebook or go through the website, and we'll take it from there.
And if you go around Howard Beach, there are so many lawns with that HBCOP sign on it. I mean, truly, it is everywhere. And it just shows how many people in the neighborhood support what you're doing, myself included. So I want to thank you all for doing that and continuing to do it. And anyone out there watching, if you do have the time, please contact them and they'll get you started because we could always use more people. So
Right, we got uniforms and everything. Like it's a real legit organization. Joe Thompson did a great job putting this together. He has a lot of years experience in different security entities, and we're under good leadership. And I'm grateful for the opportunity.
yes, and thank you to Joe Thompson as well for all that you do out there. It's much appreciated by the entire community. So Jay, do you have any more questions on HBCOP, or did you want to, because I know Jeremy also is involved in education, did you want to speak on the student
Right. Yeah, so that was yeah, another great segue. There's a lot of great segues this time around.
Yeah.
So another thing that we were going to talk about is the student loan situation. And this week, Biden has extended the student loan deferment to August 31st of this year. You know, people are pushing for him to do more of a student loan forgiveness. I think he campaigned on $10,000. People are trying to push that to at least 50. And then of course, some people would like to have all student loans forgiven completely. So yeah, we are in since you're in education, and I'm assuming you've got student loans, as a lot of people do. And wait, you're also a student right now, so that's kind of
Yes.
applicable to you. Something.
Right.
What do you
Yeah,
think
the
about?
trifecta, definitely.
So what do you think about this? Are you worried about your student loans? You thinking that there's promise on the horizon for this forgiveness, or does this affect you at all at the present time?
Well, I've been a public sector employee of the New York City Department of Education for like 16 years. And I've made a lot of student loan payments. It's hard to whittle it down, and I would like to see some student loan forgiveness. I mean, considering all of the corporate bailouts that happen, like I think average folks could use that same type of help. Like I'd like to be able to afford a house, save up for a down payment.
That's actually a really good point. We bailed out the banks. If we could bail out the banks, why can't we bail out the students? Right.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too. Like, because people would say, it looks like we might have lost Jeremy. But people would say that, you took out these loans, you knew what you're going into. Why should we, basically bail you out? But then the point is, like, yeah, these banks and these big companies got government bailouts, which are ultimately our tax dollars. Why should we, bail them out if we can't help out regular folks as well? So I think that's a good point as well.
Right.
Right.
Also,
I mean, it was too big to fail, but I guess average people they allow to fail.
right. And to Jeremy's point about being able to buy a house, we have an entire generation now who really can't. I mean, because if you have all the student loan debt, it's very hard to get a mortgage, and even if you could get a mortgage, you're in crippling debt. I mean, how are you going to pay all this back? You're taking off even further loans now. So that's a big issue. I mean, if we want for people to be able to buy homes and not have to live with their parents or rent or have a ton of roommates, we're gonna have to do something here. I think we all can hopefully agree that the system that we have is not sustainable, and we did fail an entire generation of people. But
Right.
what I want to focus on is public service, because I took out student loans in college, even more so to go to law school, but I took them out on the promise that they would be forgiven if I did 10 years of public service. I mean, those were the terms of the contract. And the prior administration outright denied over 99%, I believe it was, of student loan public service forgiveness applications, which is egregious. I mean, that was part of the term. That's what we agreed to. And I believe this new administration is better on that. Of course, now there's the moratorium, so people aren't really paying them back, but they don't have to pay them back at this point. But if you're going to entice someone to take out these loans on the promise that if they commit 10 years to the public sector, they'll get forgiven, you need to honor that promise. I mean, you
Agree.
can't tell me that people should pay their loans back even if they fulfilled a term of the contract, which was they would be forgiven if they did this thing. I mean, if we're upholding our end of the bargain, they need to uphold theirs.
Wasn't that a thing put in place? What's that? One of Obama's programs? If
He
I'm not
expanded it, if I'm not mistaken.
okay.
He expanded it. There was a program, I believe, in place already. He allowed more people to be eligible for it, I believe.
Okay. All right. And I agree. Like if that was what was in place, you know, it's different if you change it and then people after the change take on the loans. But if people have already taken these loans on under the understanding that 10-year service is going to get student loan forgiveness, then that should definitely been honored. Well, right now it looks like that it's, you know, it's kind of split in the Senate, but Republicans broadly oppose any kind of, I guess, student loan forgiveness, any debt forgiveness on this part. And I mean, should people have any debt forgiveness? People do take these loans and go to school. This is, you know, you willingly take on these loans.
Right. And I want to make this point as well. With all the talk about student loan forgiveness, we don't know to what extent it will be, when, or if it will even happen, but it's something that keeps coming up. And with all the talk around it, it's going to be hard for a lot of people to willingly pay their loans back under the fear, quite frankly, that they can pay them back and they'll be forgiven right away. What if the government decides to discharge their debt the day after they paid it off? You know, so I think a lot of people are going to hold back on paying down those loans.
And listen, how do you answer for myself? I've paid off my student loans. I am student loan debt free. Now, what happens to me to if you give, you know, you forgive other people's debt? I've already paid mine. I took the loans out. I knew I had to pay them back, and I've done it. So
right.
You know.
And that's also why I think a lot of people oppose forgiveness, because they're saying, hey, if I had to pay it back, why can't you? Or they'll say, maybe I didn't take loans out because of this very issue. I didn't think I was going to be able to pay them back, or I didn't want to pay them back. And so I had to sacrifice certain things. I didn't get that good education because I was afraid of the loan. Didn't think I could afford the loans. So why do you get to have your cake and eat it too, right? Why do you get to have your education and no debt? You know, so I think there's some of that at play as well. I don't think that that's really a great argument, because if we're saying that it's a bad thing that people have this crippling debt, well, we shouldn't say like, I had to suffer, so you should have to suffer also. I mean, we should stop the suffering. Right.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I purposely, when I went in, you know, I got an associate degree, I got a bachelor's degree. An associate degree I paid out of pocket. And my bachelor's degree, I purposely shopped around to look at what I could, you know, foreseeably deal with later as far as debt was concerned. But I have no problem with student loan forgiveness. I think if we can, you know, get people out of this crippling debt, it's better for the country as a whole. It's better for the system as a whole. And I think one of the biggest problems, though, that not just that the debt and the cost of education itself, but the way that the interest rates are being applied, where most people have these loans and their payments are just paying off the interest. And that means their loan keeps growing. And, you know, you're 40 years later, your loan's more than it was when you initially took it out. I think that is a big failing. It shouldn't be able to accrue that much.
Absolutely. I mean, and you could also compare it to predatory loans for real estate purchases, right? And part of why we saw the bailouts and also obviously a big part of the reason why we got ourselves in that mess that we're in when it came to the housing crisis and the financial collapse. I think there are a lot of analogies there. Like we said, if we were that concerned about the banks and bailing out the corporations, why aren't we looking out for the people who are really kids? I mean, you know, some of this, I guess, was postgraduate. Some people were older, but a lot of people who take out these loans really don't know what they're signing. I don't know if that's an excuse for them, but I think it's something to keep in mind, that there's so much pressure on, you know, put on the youth by society to go to college, obtain a higher education at any cost. Do they really know what they're getting themselves into at 18? You know,
to some degree, yeah, I agree with that to some degree. I think, and I've said it before, this really is, and you know, it might seem like an extreme position, but I think this thing about education and the crippling debt is really a national security issue. When you take it to its logical conclusion, because otherwise you end up with brain drain, you end up with you know, financial instability for the next generation, and it just causes a whole host of problems. It should be a priority for the nation to make sure that we have this education, that we can compete on the global scale. Because even when, what was it, the 2008 collapse and all of that, when the jobs are really scaled back, there were a lot of jobs out there. It's just that we didn't have a lot of people qualified for them at that high level because we have this educational crunch.
James in the chat says student loans is one of the main reasons I never went to college. Never thought.
And I think, yeah, a lot of people it is. And I think there's there are different steps that can be taken that I think should also be put more out there. Like, you know, people can go the route of community college to get that associate degree first, which is much, much, much cheaper than going to a 4-year university right off the bat, and then finish up your two years at a university. A state school is much cheaper than a private school. And so I think that's another option to really limit how much you end up paying. I see in the article that I was reading about this today that the education department has taken some steps to offer some relief, and they're on track to cancel more than 17 billion owed by borrowers since Biden took office. So I think that's a pretty good sign on that someone's doing something.
I wanted to mention actually something that we call the New York Promise Program, which is a bill that I got the pleasure to draft when I was working in Albany. Actually, I was working directly with then Vice President Joe Biden on it. I got a call from the White House when I was working in Albany. They were trying to identify legislators in each state who might be willing to introduce this. And I was counsel to Senator James Sanders up in Albany. And so we went forward with it. And that kind of became the basis, or laid some of the groundwork for the Excelsior scholarship that was put in place by the state after that, trying to make higher education more affordable. But that was a great experience, because even back then, that was back in 2016, we had identified that this was an issue, and you wanted to do everything you could to make people able to get an education, a higher education in New York, and also then stay in New York, hopefully, and contribute to the economy. I mean, that's also a big part of it as well. And I think that was part of what the state was looking to do, kind of pay it forward. You know, we're going to give people scholarships and help them go to school, and hopefully in return, they'll then get a good job and put those skills to use in our state.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, like, you know, when I think about the whole student loan crisis and, you know, how people will hold back because they don't want to take loans out, you know, it also makes me think of the state of our high schools and our free education, you know, our guaranteed education. Like, you can't do anything with a high school diploma. Like, maybe some people will disagree. Like, you could get into the military. Yeah, that's good. That's a great option. But with a high school diploma, it doesn't really get you much. So, you know, I've heard of programs, you know, where you go into high school and then you stay there for that 5th or 6th year and you get your 2-year degree. And there's schools like Clara Barton where people come out with medical training, but they're far and few in between. And we need to update our high school education, you know, where people can graduate from high school and have a trade or have skills that are more marketable than just that, you know, what it's worth now. And they're far and few in between. As a paraprofessional, I had the privilege of going to the Brooklyn STEAM Center, and the students that I worked alongside were doing construction. So when they graduated from high school, they were able to have like OSHA certificates and other certificates that I don't remember the names of. You know, they taught them how to do electrical wiring, plumbing, construction, cooking, robotics, and that was fantastic. But only 8 schools participated at a time, you know. So these pilot programs are I think they're wonderful, but they should be like popping up all over the place. I've even said to Borough President Donovan Richards, are we doing that? And he said, we're in the right, direction where we don't have a STEAM center, but I'm trying to fund schools to, provide that type of education. And I think we have to really keep pushing and moving in that direction where our free public education can address these shortcomings without people going into debt and having to live the rest of their lives holding off on starting a family, buying a house, these types of things. Like, I think society deserves that, more practical education, than just you're going to go and then you got to get your 4-year degree in order to make a real living.
Right, and even that these days, the bachelor's degree is not as strong as it used to be. Really, some of that's being pushed even to get to master's level at the very least in a lot of cases. I think one thing that is kind of promising, or can help bridge that gap, is there are a lot of fields today that are more okay with certifications. Especially in tech spaces, and you've got places like Google and Microsoft that and companies like Facebook that offer certifications which is much cheaper than a college degree, and they're hiring based off of these things. So if you can get a professional certification from Facebook in social media marketing, or digital marketing, or from Google in IT support and things like that. And these courses they offer, and some of them are free courses, some of them are, just a few $1,000s. And these are higher paying careers, or at least good starting careers, that can kind of balance, or not balance, but kind of bridge that gap to some degree.
Jeremy, I know you got to run. Any closing words here?
I had a real good time. Thank you guys for inviting me. I'd love to come back. I always want to talk about the state of education, because as an educator, and there's a million things I'd have to say about it. Like, even the SATs, what kind of Nazi death march are we leading these kids to? You have to start at the same time. You have to end at the same time. You can't go back a section. There's so much stress on the students and even the personnel. Like, you have to see how crazy teachers and everybody proctoring is about the SATs. Like, you would really think it was some sort of military state. And I'm hearing people, when it comes to SATs, talking about, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want to lose my job. Like, when it comes to SATs, like, people think they're going to lose their livelihoods because, like, the state or someone's going to kick down the door and say, hey, why does that kid have a iPhone watch on or something? Like, it's so stressful for everybody involved. The students can't leave until the allotted time is up. Like, if you're done with section 4, like, just can't leave and escape that pressure. You got to stay the whole time. If not, then your test is invalidated. So thank you for having me. I hope you invite me back to discuss education or more HBCOP stuff.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jeremy. Once again, thank you to HBCOP and all you guys do out there.
All right. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Thank you for coming on. One quick thing about the SATs, it's kind of funny, not funny. When he's talking about that. I couldn't get into, so I had my associate degree, and I was going to, when I moved to Florida, I was going to go into Florida State. But I couldn't get into Florida State because the College Board lost my SATs. And so there's no record of me taking the SATs. So for me to get into Florida State, I would have had to go through their community college system, get another associate degree to be eligible to join Florida State, because I didn't have any SAT records, and they still have no record of my SATs.
Wow.
So yeah, that kind of sucks.
So Jay, did you want to put the poll out there this week?
The poll for this week. Okay, well, let's talk about the poll this week. Let's talk about student loan forgiveness. Should student loans be forgiven for college students? Well, I guess retake that. Take two. And we know people have entered into student loans willingly, but student loan debt is a major issue in our country. People are suffering from crippling debt, and it's really messing with their lives, their livelihoods, economy, everything. Should there be a student loan forgiveness plan in place?
Sounds good to me. We'll put that out there and see what people think and report back our results next week.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
Like I'm good with it. I think, you know, I've paid off my loans, but I have no problem if people get relief.
you may have noticed that my background is different. It's because I'm working on petitioning. We are headed to Albany. I wanted to talk about this lawsuit that really kind of threw a wrench in the entire process here. For those unaware, every 10 years, the state has to redraw all of its district lines as a result of the census, and it's supposed to keep the districts equally populated as best we can do it. Well, the lines were redrawn. We had all new districts for Congress, for state Senate, for Assembly, and we're in the middle. In fact, we're at the end of the petitioning period now. Petitions are due this week for these new districts. So people are running for office under these new district lines. A judge in upstate New York just threw them all out, and he said it was unconstitutional. He actually said there was too much political influence in the process, and that he actually called it a constitutional amendment because the voters of New York passed this measure saying that there should be an independent commission, and basically their will was to take the politics out of it. Of course, there are a lot of concerns about gerrymandering and so forth. And this judge said that this process was too political, and that he said that the Democrats who control the process exerted too much power to get more seats and to keep seats in Congress and in these statewide seats. And as of now, we're petitioning, we're handing in petitions, and we don't have valid districts according to this judge. Now, there was a stay issued because this is being appealed, and we'll see what happens on appeal. It's quite possible that this all gets overturned on appeal and the new districts that were passed remain in place, but it's all up in the air right now. I mean, it is possible. It's within the realm of possibility that we could have a whole new primary, meaning a whole new petitioning period with new districts months from now.
Wow.
What a mess we find ourselves in.
Yeah, and I remember petitioning. That was an interesting. Those were interesting times, especially that first campaign that we did. We had to hit the streets, and it takes a lot of effort. You got to go out and do all that. So to have to do it again in the same, especially the same election cycle, I can see how that would be very frustrating and very tiring.
Yes,
for everybody.
it's tough. I
Very
mean,
costly.
It's very costly. I was going to say that it's certainly a drain on a campaign's resources, sometimes even too cost prohibitive. I mean, we talk about the price of going to college, and some people can't afford it. A lot of people can't afford to run for office. You don't realize how much money goes into paying folks and even just spreading your message beyond that if you're lucky enough to make the ballot. But then there are people like me, a bunch of lawyers who also have to be hired to kind of navigate this crazy maze that we're in. A lot of people think that the whole system should be revamped or thrown out. In some states, they don't even have petitioning. People can just pay a fee to get on the ballot. But again, paying a fee, these things take money, right? So petitioning is supposed to be a way to kind of be granted access to democracy in a sense. It's like a direct line to the voter, where you don't have to pay a bunch of money to get on the ballot. In theory, right? In theory, you're just going to the people and saying, "Hey, sign my petition. The people want me on the ballot." But it's a whole process, and you have to know what you're doing. You have to do it right. And nowadays, it's even harder to find people to do the petitioning for you because of the pandemic. Last year it was almost impossible in some cases because people were collecting unemployment, and they told us they were either getting the same amount of money or maybe a little bit less, but it wasn't worth it for them to go out and really risk themselves catching COVID, being out there during petitioning when they can sit at home and collect a check, which was almost as much. So that became an issue as well. If you're a campaign, even if you have the resources, it can be hard finding the people to do it. because especially for some of these larger races, you really can't rely on all volunteers. Unless you have a volunteer army who's going to go out there every single day. People underestimate what it takes. It really does take a lot to get this done.
And I would imagine, especially these days, like during the COVID days, not only, getting people who are willing to go out there and do it, but people who are willing to open their door to someone knocking on the door. Especially right now, like I would be hesitant to open the door for someone just coming into the door who's been walking around the neighborhood to get a petition signed. Like, who knows what you're bringing? You could be coughing COVID on me at the same time. So it makes it real difficult, I think, to not only do it the first time, but then to have to do it again. But Jerry, like you mentioned, gerrymandering is a big problem, and it's one that is unfair. The public is very frustrated with. It's very political, and if this judgment from this judge makes it much more of a fair system, I don't see a downside to that.
Right. Gerrymandering is an issue. The thing is, though, people are inherently political, right? So if people are going to be drawing the lines, people have agendas. I mean, unless it's going to be like a computer generated map where they just look at strictly population. But the thing is that the law does allow for communities, for example, to be kept intact. And they try not to draw districts that carve up boroughs or neighborhoods to the extent possible. You do have to have roughly equal population. And so it's going to be impossible to have it that clean.
Right.
But there are considerations that are made, demographic considerations are made. And so at its core, this really is a political process. Like I said, unless you're going to have a machine just spit out maps based on, just counting people from east to west and until you get to that number and then move on. That's one way to do it. But if you do it that way, you're also breaking up neighborhoods and, and causing other problems. So there's really no perfect solution to this.
Right. Yeah. The algorithm idea kind of takes the human element out of it. Unless, there's enough information fed into it to identify people based on other things besides just the population number, to try to keep those neighborhoods and those types of environments intact. But then on this other side, like you said, it is an inherently political process because we're talking about, political lines here. I think it's just there is too much of a biased influence from either of the parties when they go in to draw these lines, because of course they want to make it something that's going to be beneficial for themselves, and I think that definitely needs to be lessened. It's not a perfect system. There's always room for improvement on everything. And
the people of New York did vote for this bipartisan or independent commission that was supposed to take some of the partisan politics out of it. It was supposed to have Republicans, Democrats coming together. Of course, they couldn't come together. They couldn't agree on anything. And, the independent commission's plans were scrapped upon arrival in Albany. So it is what it is. I find all this interesting. If you look at the way some of these districts are drawn, I have a problem when they cut neighborhoods up, because if you look at, like, for example, community meetings, if I'm going to go represent an area, I want to be able to go to a meeting in that community and reach the people of that neighborhood and know that they're my constituents. And this is a place I can go to reach them. It's a place they can go to get information from their elected officials, and it all works out that way. But if you're carving up communities and drawing these weirdly shaped districts where it's like, I've got, a fifth of this Community, a tenth of this one, a tiny slither of this, and then a half of this one, it really makes things difficult, because now you're going to a community meeting in one neighborhood where maybe as an elected official, you're there because it's part of your district, but maybe only 10% or 15% of the people in the room are even your constituents, because it might be the meeting for this one neighborhood, but the neighborhood itself is so carved up. And so it makes it harder. It makes it harder for the people to get information. It makes it harder for the elected officials to stay in touch with the people. And so, I think we need better drawn districts where we can have neighborhoods represented to the extent possible by one person. Richmond Hill is a great example of this. Richmond Hill has multiple, I want to say 7 or 8 different assembly people. I mean, that's absurd. And you also, by doing that, You also deprive things like South Asian representation. A lot of people in Richmond Hill and in that area would want to have a South Asian in office to represent the area because it's such a large population there. But the way that it's carved up, it makes that difficult. So, these are all considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's I think it's all kind of a work in progress. What was it? Even in some of the founding words are in order to form a more perfect union, which implies that there is constant work that needs to be done to refine these systems, to make things work better, to make things much more fair. Yeah, hey, hopefully it gets solved, that you don't have to go through. That kind of happened in the campaign, the first campaign that you did, when the districts changed in the middle of the campaign. Remember that?
Right, and there were lawsuits happening there as well. We had petitioning, and we didn't even know where the district lines were going to be.
Right.
And all of this really disenfranchises people.
Yeah.
I mean, you want people to run for office and step up, represent their community, maybe people who are outside the political world, but you're coming into a system that is so difficult to navigate. And even for people like me now who are on the inside, I mean, I do election law. It's crazy. It's crazy trying to navigate it.
Yeah.
For me. So could you imagine if you're someone who's never run for office, who's not a lawyer, doesn't really know any of this, just trying to step up to serve their community, and you're told that you're petitioning for a district that might not exist in a few weeks. You don't know where your lines are going to be. It's hard enough to do it right when the variables are set, but now you're throwing all these wrenches in, and it makes it almost impossible.
Yeah. And it should be, there should be a way to make it a little bit easier. Because like you said, for people coming into the process for the first time, it can be very overwhelming. And I think, it is a very important position. These positions are very important, and they hold the public trust, but they should also be accessible to the public to partake in it. So yeah, there's got to be some middle ground there somewhere.
Right.
But I think that was we had this was the show of awesome segues. I think everything seems slow. Yeah, this was the segue show. We should have a little image of us like riding on segways. So
now I'm getting carried away with the segue stuff. Very on the nose.
Yeah.
I think that comes with the experience of doing it,
Yeah. Right. Yeah, absolutely. This is not the first iteration of some sort of kind of I guess talk show or radio show or type of show that we've done. There's been several over the years.
Podcast, live stream, whatever you want to call it.
Hip hop show and radio shows and so. But it was good. I think we had a good one. I think Jeremy gave some good information. He was a really good guest, and it's good to see that the stuff that HBCOP is doing, and having those things out there for the community.
Absolutely. So I got to finish my work here, and I've been working the past few days. Probably be working late tonight, and tomorrow by the morning I'll be up in Albany. And we also have Black Caucus weekend this weekend too. So hopefully I'll be around for some of that in Albany.
Absolutely. Well, don't forget to take a break.
Yeah, I'll try. Like we were saying earlier.
Yep.
It's funny on that topic earlier about the confident people.
Right.
I was actually reading something before where it was a lawyer, but they said that the secret to being a successful and a happy lawyer is to take weekends off. Now, I don't think it always works out that cleanly. I mean, between everything I do in law and politics and the community, music, what's a weekend, right? There really is no weekend, but I understand the spirit behind that, which is you have to take time for yourself. Otherwise you will burn out and you won't serve anyone. You try to be everything to everyone and you're going to fail.
Absolutely. And it's also about what you mentioned earlier. It's about setting those boundaries. You know, there has to be some time when you can turn off from whatever your main thing or whatever is taking up the most of your time, regardless of what it is. I think there's several artist interviews talking about Eminem and how he basically treats it like a 9-to-5 job. He goes into the studio at like 9 a.m. He clocks out at like 4 and he's done. You know, he's like, I'll see you tomorrow. And there's been a couple of artists, because, you know, in general with artists, they come in like 10 p.m. and they go to like, you know, 7, 8 in the morning, or they come in whenever. And there was an artist, I forgot who it was, talking about when they were doing a collab with Eminem. And so they booked studio time and then they show up at like, you know, the afternoon, and Eminem's on his way home. He's like, yeah, I'm out. He's like, wait, what's the studio? He's like, I've been here since 9 a.m. Time up. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. You know,
Right.
And so
Lunch break at
having that
12.
boundary. Huh?
That's structure. I said lunch
Yeah.
break at 12 and everything. It's like it's a structured day.
Absolutely.
Sometimes we need that. I mean, we all work differently. Some people don't like the set schedule, but we all
Right.
need some kind of structure or just a boundary or a break every now and then, so that
Right.
we don't kill ourselves doing this.
Right, absolutely. Because I know myself, if I'm working on something, some kind of a project, and I think you're even more so than me, is that, you know, when you sit down on a project, you might not move for hours. And, you know, for me, like I forget to eat, I forget to get anything to drink, and I'll be just there for hours. So, you know, the day will be gone by, and it's like, oh wow, I haven't had anything at all to eat or whatever, and you know, so that's
Yeah,
perfect.
let's take care of ourselves. Let's help ourselves so that we have the ability to help others.
Absolutely. And with that, I think we should wrap up the
All right.
latest stream. And I think we are still deciding if we're going with the name Nuance or not. Or did we decide that's going to be what it is?
I like the name unless people have a better idea. Once we have
Yeah.
the name, we can set up the YouTube channel and, you know, put our episodes up and be more efficient.
All right.
All
So
right.
have a good evening and good morning for people out here, if anyone. Take care of yourselves.
All right. Have a good week.
You too.